Hello everybody. Hello. Welcome. Trying to have a new setup here, so I apologize if it's a little weird. Just let me know if I need to fix anything. But welcome in everyone. Good afternoon. Hello Sharon. Welcome in. I'm wondering, I need to just turn my page here to see. I may need to bump this up a little bit, but got a new setup here, so bear with me, everybody. But I thought, well, we better get this sorted out. So, we'll go through it. Let me see if this one works better. There we go. I think that'll work. All right. Excellent. Yay. Hello, Kaya. Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. All right, and I have my camera at a little different angle, so everybody just wish me the best on the puzzle situation. But welcome in. Hello, Regal. Hello, Nancy. Hi. Good afternoon. Oh my gosh, so it's been a bit bonkers around here over the last couple of days, and I thought, well, you know what? It's going to help us if we go through what the law says. So I thought, let's do that. Let's go through and actually read what it says. Hello. Yes, indeed. Hopefully this is okay up here. I'm ready for Space Force. Oh my gosh, everybody. I tell you, as soon as I take you through these statutes, I want to walk through the Brennan Center for Justice, which is out of, I think it's out of NYU Law School there. They really have put together a great set of materials for this. Highly recommend going online. Their website is very easy to navigate and to look through, and it's got all of the links to everything if you're curious. So what I'm going to be going through is their actual summary here. What they did was they put together this great chart explaining what kind of emergencies there are and then what gets triggered. So all of this is from the Brennan Center for Justice online. And I printed out all the times that the actual National Emergencies Act has been declared. So we can go through those as well. Hello. Yeah, I'll take one. I want extra ketchup. Please, thank you. Yes, the law always helps me. It helps me make sense of a mad world. I mean, I think it does. I like to pretend that it does, right? I'll live in that place where it makes sense. Hello. Oh, I'm glad. So let me bump this up. Can everybody see the comments okay? I just want to make sure here. Again, I've got a new little set here of tripod and lighting. So this is my first maiden voyage here. Hello, Jess. Okay. All right, well, welcome in. Excellent. Well, welcome in, everyone. Oh my gosh, oh my goodness gracious. I was on a live last night on a panel, and we were talking, of course, everyone's talking about this right now. And I thought, well, let's pull these statutes again. And I'm so thankful for Nemo and Jobu for kind of talking through this. If you want the best pronunciation of posse comitatus, you're going to need to ask Nemo, all right, because he's got it. And then, of course, Jobu is all about the law. So I'm so thankful for that assistance. Can you bump it up a bit more? The paperwork? There we go. How's that? Is that better? Can't stay. That's all right. Thank you so much, though, for at least swinging by. Doesn't follow the law. Well, right. So, all right, let's just dive right in, everybody. Let's, as my Taurus professor used to say, let's just, crack it open like a tauntaun and see how it goes. So here we go. Let's take a look at the law first. And something that's, really, I think, misleading is this, the Insurrection Act, right? Everyone keeps talking about, it's the Insurrection Act. So it's like some big piece of law out there, but it's actually not. It's only just a few sentences. I did do a post on those earlier if you're interested, but just to remind everybody about what it actually is. The Insurrection Act, it's in 10 U.S. Code Section 251 through 254. And it's very small. It's a very small piece. So, yes, of course. So federal aid for state governments. Whenever there's an insurrection, so let's start highlighting just right off the bat. We don't want to get too far into this. Whenever there's an insurrection in any state against its government, all right, so there's a fight against the state's own government, the president may, upon the request of its legislature, so this is the state's legislature here, or its governor, if the legislature cannot be convened. So this is only if, they aren't able to get into session, can call into federal service such of the militia of the other states. Now, when I'm talking about militia, I want you to kind of think of the National Guard, all right? We're not talking about the people, up in the mountains getting together. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the national, right? Rent-free, exactly right. So I'm talking about the National Guard here. Now, our National Guard's kind of a weird situation because they're state, but they can also be federal. In fact, they can flip. They're kind of swingers, but primarily they're at the state level to get everything started until the feds pull them in, all right? So, such of the militia of the other states in the number requested by that state. Here, let me make sure, am I still in? See, for me, I'm actually out of frame, everyone, so I apologize, but that top part's out of frame for me, so I gotta pull this back in. Number requested by that state and use such of the armed forces. So this would include our other armed force people as he considers necessary to suppress the insurrection. All right, so that first piece here, well, oh dear, fountain encoded, oh dear, you know what I mean though, right? They can be state, federal, depending. All right, so so the first part of the code here is if there's an insurrection within a state by its own people, all right? So that's that situation. So section 251, if we were to apply that to Los Angeles right now, let's just, do it right now. We don't have an insurrection occurring in the state. You might say, well, what exactly is an insurrection? And that can be defined in a whole bunch of ways. But I think we have a pretty good idea that, the way the protesters are, if you're just protesting, you're not doing an insurrection situation. Now, if you're starting to escalate the situation or interrupt a government function, like the January 6ers did when they interrupted the count of the votes, now we're talking about some kind of meddling within the government. But here in California, we don't have the people of California insurrectioning against California. All right, so that's just not in play here. Right, what's a protest and what's a riot? And those are great questions. And it's going to depend on the circumstances and what's going on. When you think of a protest, you think of peaceful, of course. And then with a riot, you think of it's just out of control. And there's so many people doing lawless, things. Although you can't have a protest, it's illegal. But anyway, so that's kind of one of the pieces that gets defined later. So let's look at section then again. So we're looking at an insurrection here for our previous section. We don't have one, so 251 doesn't work. So 10 U.S. Code 252, and this is the use of militia and armed forces to enforce federal authority. So this is the one that they are tooting their horns all about, all right? To enforce federal authority. So when they're in California, they're saying you aren't respecting the authority of federal law enforcement or whomever's out there causing the troubles, because we don't know because they're not labeled. But this is what we're talking about, all right? We're talking about this section of the code. So 252, and I'll bump this up just a little bit here. All right, so it says whenever the president considers, what does that mean? Not sure. That unlawful obstructions, all right, so we have an obstruction combinations, all right, or assemblages, okay, or rebellion here. So we've got 4 different pieces against the authority of the United States. So the prior section said against the state, but now they're saying we're not looking for an insurrection, we're looking for an obstruction, a combination or assemblage or rebellion against the federal government here. Make it, and so because of that, those actions make it impracticable to enforce the laws of the United States. So they're saying, well, we can't do our job to enforce the laws because of your assemblages, right? In any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings. So this is also the kicker here. The question is like, okay, so the feds are saying we can't enforce our own federal laws because of your, assemblages and rebellion here in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings. And so our courts aren't working either. So court orders, any kind of due process going through the criminal law process, none of those are working. That's not working. And we still can't do our job here because we've been using the force of the judiciary and we are unable to enforce our own laws right now. He may call into federal service, such as militia of any state, and use such of the armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce those laws or to suppress the rebellion. So now we've got 2 elements to it. We're saying enforce federal law is the first piece. And the second one is to suppress rebellion. All right. So rebellion's really kind of coming out of the woodwork here in this particular piece, right? We're saying, first of all, you are unlawfully gathering, right? So that's going to be a First Amendment question right here. And doing some obstructing of federal people, combination. I'm not exactly sure how they're using combinations in this particular piece, but I'm assuming that it's probably a mix of a bunch of different things here. Or assemblages, I think we can figure that out too, or rebellion against the authority. So you're not rebelling against the United States, you're rebelling against the authority of the United States. So you're saying, and that's a difference. That's a difference, right? So if I've got some, I don't know, everybody, when I start drawing, people laugh. Let's just say you've got some, ICE fella out there and you don't really know because he's just dressed like a normal person with a mask and sunglasses. But he's got short hair, tennis shoes on, and he's kind of being a jerk. So we're going to say he's ICE, all right? So ICE comes up and says, you need to stop yelling. And you're like, I've got a First Amendment right. Why do I have to stop yelling? And they're like, because we're listening for, we're listening for prostitutes. And so they're like, well, okay, whatever. And they're like, well, we're not going to stop yelling. I don't care if you are looking for prostitutes. And so what's happening here is you're saying, you ICE fella, I'm not going to listen to you. But does that mean then that the authority of the United States, you are disregarding that? Are you rebelling against the authority that the United States has? No. Again, please draw. Well, it's best that I don't. But this is what's important, right? Because throughout all of everything that's happening with this administration, they're just playing with words. And so when you come in, you might think, wow, when does the president consider something? Well, we don't know, first of all. Unlawful obstruction. So a lawful obstruction combination or assemblage is fine. It's just an unlawful obstruction that's not right. Or rebellion. So even a lawful rebellion's okay. And it's against the authority of the United States. It's not against a particular person or something along those lines. It's the authority. So these are kind of questions then you could toss out in an argument. So because of that, makes it impracticable. Again, what exactly does that mean? Well, we'd have to get that defined. To enforce the laws of the United States. So that's another piece, to enforce the law. So which law are they trying to enforce? So if we, again, use California as an example, they're going to come in and say, well, we've got immigration laws that we're trying to enforce, and you're in our way. You are yelling, and you're in our way, and we're trying to enforce the laws. So then we have to go, walk it back then, right? So hold on. Are they gathering unlawfully to obstruct combinations, assemblage, or rebel against the authority of the United States? Again, that's the big question, making it so they can't enforce their immigration laws. So I think that's a really big question. Are they being kept from enforcing immigration laws in California? Let me just ask that to the chat. Hey, chat. I'm curious. I mean, I've not watched it probably as closely as a lot of other people have, but are they preventing anyone there from going in and enforcing their, I would like to say warrants, but I don't think they have those, but enforcing their, reign of whatever they're trying to do? Yes, yes. Okay, yes, they are. So are they making it so that, all right, let me draw a picture of an ICE agent here, okay? I'm sorry. I'm going to say I'm sorry. All right, so here's an ICE agent. Are they preventing him from doing what his job is, which is going into a building, right, and checking things out? And if he knows there's people there that haven't fully got their documentation together, so go in and talk to them. Are people in the protest preventing that from happening? No, right. And that's why I'm asking. That's what, thanks, Steffi. They're not preventing agents from lawful actions. And that's the key, Shannon. That's absolutely the key. Yeah, they don't have warrants. Well, they're a different breed here. They're in a little different world because it's not a full criminal situation. So warrants are a little bit different. But from that, what we're saying here is they're not obstructing, right? That's important. They're not rebelling against the authority of the United States. And again, we've got this combinations or assemblages. So kind of this mixed situation or gathering. So at the end of it, no one's being prevented from doing their job, which is that's the key to all of it. If they're not preventing the feds from doing their job, then this is not going to be applicable. You can't apply Section 252. So the previous section doesn't work because we don't have an insurrection. So in this section, they're not doing anything unlawful yet. And that's why it's so important to remain calm and to make sure you're following the rules and be careful. This is why you need to do that, because you don't want to fall into this category of doing something that is unlawful that could prevent them or give them an argument. All right. And then they're saying they can't enforce the laws under the United States in any state by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings. Now, the judicial proceedings piece again, when we're talking about going through the immigration process or whatever it is that they're doing out there. So they're saying we can't take people into court. We can't go through the whole due process because again, with martial law, and I bring this up because everyone needs to remember, martial law, we're dealing with military law, which means our civilian courts are no longer working, right? So that's where we get the martial law element from it. So the next question is, are they doing stuff that's so unlawful they're unable to uphold the law and do their job through the court system, right? That's another question to ask here. So that's next. So that's the first piece of it, unlawful and prohibiting them from doing their job and taking people through the judicial process. All right. Then next, he may call, because of course it's a he may call into federal service, such as the militias of any state, right? So that's what we're referring to as the National Guard for the purposes of this, and use such of the armed forces as he considers necessary to enforce those laws or to suppress rebellion. So armed forces can be used here for whatever's necessary to enforce the law. All right. So you're prohibiting them from enforcing it. So they're saying you can pull in extra help to help come in and make sure that, they're keeping people from preventing them from doing their job. All right. So, and I don't know, maybe ICE is doing their job. You're gone. Okay. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe ICE is doing their job. I don't, oh, you're gone. Okay. Whatever, all right? I'm just explaining what the law is here. But there's several things that are not present in our current situation here. Let me grab my other pen. Here we go. Several things that aren't present. We don't have a rebellion against the state of California, all right? That's not happening right now. And again, that's important. We don't have so far an unlawful interference with what the officers, law enforcement people are doing, right? Or even if we did have some kind of interference, is it at a level that makes it so they are unable to do their job by an ordinary course of going through their normal processes, right? Like the powers they already have in order to do their job. All right. So we're missing a lot of people here. Or a lot of pieces to this. Right. So that's number 252. And I'm going to say for section 252, again, this is what they're trying to use to justify, bringing in other people, right? But are all the factors being met? And for that, I would say no, not at the moment. If things start getting crazy, perhaps. All right. And then next, here's our other big piece of it too. So this is the next piece. So again, I know they come in and they're like, oh, we're using the Insurrection Act. But the problem is it's not the full piece of it. We're not using 251. We're using 252 and 253. So interference with state and federal law here. My opinion. This isn't my opinion, hoodie. I'm literally reading what the law says. These are words in the U.S. Code, okay? So next, 253, the president, by using the militia or the armed forces or both, or by any other means, shall take measures as he considers necessary. So again, we have this is a discretionary piece. We don't know what that means. Necessary to suppress. All right. So in order to keep it from happening in a state, so we've got state federal power in question. Any insurrection, now we've already said we're not really dealing with an insurrection. Domestic violence, well, maybe there could be some of that. Unlawful combination. Hold on, let me look up the exact definition of that before I get too much further, everybody. Let me pull the federal code up here. 1 second. Right. So it seems like the combination is using a term to say groups of people coming together, right? But the whole goal, again, is to obstruct what they're doing here. All right. So unlawful groups of people or conspiracy. And we've talked about conspiracy as an inchoate offense before. Yes, there's actual legal definitions for insurrections. All right, and then number 1, so that it hinders the execution of the laws of that state. So we've got state law and of the United States, and then we've got federal law, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity. This is the section saying if your civil rights are being violated, then that's going to give justification for using section 253. All right, let that sink in. So they're saying here, the execution of laws of that state and of the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is being deprived of a right, a privilege, or immunity, or protection named in the Constitution. All right, so and secured by laws. All right. So I think that's really interesting. So that's part 1 here. Is anybody being deprived of oops, sorry everybody, that was my cat. Is anybody being deprived of civil rights here so that the federal agents need to come in and help you? That's the other question there. Right. So someone's being deprived of freedom of speech. Let's use that as an example. Let's use the First Amendment. Let's use freedom of speech here. So are you keeping someone from being able to speak, the way that you want to do it under the doctrine of freedom of speech, right? Freedom to assemble, right? See, it is backwards. That is what's backwards here. They're trying to use this section of the code. They're claiming that the protesters are prohibiting people from exercising their civil rights. This is what we were talking about when we were talking about desegregation, all right? This is what was used here. So what happened was there were a lot of people in Arkansas that were gathered and making it prohibiting the students from being able to desegregate the school. All right. Now, an interesting thing, too, is that the National Guard actually stood at the school when all of this started. But the National Guard, I think this is a really good example, was sent there originally by the governor. So the National Guard was saying to the students, you're not allowed to come in. So they were actually preventing them from being in compliance with Brown versus Board of Education until Eisenhower said, what? Because the governor said, well, we're going to withdraw all of our guards, so nobody's going to be protected from anything. And then Eisenhower said, all right, well, I'm going to federalize them and send them back. So he sent them back to protect the students. So that's, I think, one of the best ways to remember how the National Guard functions. The governor called up the National Guard to prevent the kids from going to school. And then Eisenhower's like, dude, you need to comply with the Supreme Court. And he said, I'm not going to, and I'm not even going to put any protection in place. So it'll be mob rule. And Eisenhower's like, ring, ring, National Guard, you need to go back and protect the kids. All right? So I think that's a really good way to understand what role between the state and the federal government happens here. So anyway, so we're talking about that deprivation of a right. So somebody is being deprived of a right there. And the constituted authorities of that state, this is the other key piece in California, are unable, and that's not true, fail, and then how do they fail? Who decides if they failed or not? Or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or to give that protection. So this is all going to come back here to this word fail. So we think you're failing local law enforcement to uphold the law here in civil rights. How do we know if they failed? It has to go to court. The court will make the determination as to whether or not there's been a failure. All right? Because their job is to interpret the law. Right. So coming in and saying 253, there's an interference with state and federal law. Well, first of all, I don't think we're dealing with a state law situation. We're just looking at federal law, which again, that's important. But the federal law they're saying is a civil right. Are the protesters preventing a civil right from being used? And to such a degree that the state's own law enforcement can't keep it under control, right? So all the troopers, all the locals, they can't keep it under control. And then number 2 is the next piece. So there's 2 parts. This is an or, so you only need 1 or 2. Opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. That's the other piece. And this, again, is the second part they're probably going to rely on here is saying, so let's go back to the first part. The president, by using the militia or the armed force or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if it opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. All right, so that's the other thing. And this is all like, well, who makes that decision? Who's going to decide whether or not? Because we have the executive branch in Article 2 setting out and being able to use these powers. But the executive branch is not the one that is determining what exactly the words mean, unlike what they would like to say. Because they would argue, no, we do make that decision. It's under the president's executive power under Article 2 of the Constitution, right? They're going to say, well, he's the commander-in-chief of the military, or he's the, the number one law enforcement in the entire United States. Right, but I'll tell you what, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the president can pull in militia or armed forces to suppress anything going on in the state. All right, that's not in the Constitution. The only place that's allowed is in this piece of law right here. This is the only place that allows for that. All right, so I think that's important to remember as we go through this. All right, so there we go. It's looking like 253 is pretty weak, but they're going to try to argue it on semantics, stating that this group of people meet all the qualifications. All right, so our group of people here to be suppressed for an insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination of groups of people, which you need in order to have, this is part of the insurrection definition. That's why it's kind of weird how it's written. Or a conspiracy, all right? So we have to have 1, 2, 3, or 4. So 4 different acts are all that's included in here. Now, I would say none of these acts are in place. And if they're not in place, it won't trigger the rest of the statute. All right? Where'd I go to law school? I went to an accredited law school. That's really all that matters. I don't like to give my location because I get a lot of trolls and people that get frustrated with me for literally reading the law to them. So part 2 is going to be the one that they're going to take a look at. So the governor of California is like, we're going to be filing a lawsuit. When that lawsuit gets filed, which could be any time now, you will see these arguments being made in court. Yes, there's a lot of distractions. Yeah, there's a lot of distractions for sure. For sure. But everything's a distraction. It doesn't mean it's not important. We just all have to figure out a way to get through it. All right, so with that, we just went through, that's the Insurrection Act, everybody, all right? So you got that, and we need to think about that as we go through and look to see when the Insurrection Act can be used when it's triggered because there's an emergency going on, all right? Right. Here we go. So next, we're talking about posse comitatus. This is that idea that, and saying, well, wait a minute. So we've got some problems here. Let's say we want to, and then again, all that's left here is that there's a proclamation saying you need to get out of here. And then that Guam and the Virgin Islands are covered. So those are the 4 pieces. But let's just, for argument's sake, let's say, all right, well, we're going to use this section of the Insurrection Act. We're going to use the militia and the armed forces because y'all are getting in our way and we can't do our job and your courts aren't working and our courts aren't working. Nothing's working. So we're just going to do everything we want. Let's just say that that's happening. Then you have to say, well, wait a minute. I didn't think the military could actually get involved with local law enforcement, right? That's kind of a big deal because once the National Guard is pulled up to the feds, once they are made federal, then it's not the governor, it's the federal government that attaches. And if the federal government attaches, then posse comitatus attaches. So our National Guard's going to be included in here once that attaches. Oh, are we kidding? Oh my goodness. All right. So here we go. Let's go through this real quick. All right, here we go. 18 U.S. Code Section 1385, the use of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Space Force as posse comitatus. Now, of course, the Space Corps has been added, and actually, I believe in the beginning, it was only the Army and the Navy that were included in the military that could be used to enforce federal law, but then later on, the Marine Corps and the Air Force were added to it, and now the Space Force is added to it. So here's what this particular one says here. Whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution, so it needs to be expressly authorized, not inferred, not in the water blots, not in the penumbra. It has to be clearly expressly authorized in the Constitution, which is like nothing. I'll come back to it. You're going to be all right. I'm going to help you out. Just a minute. Don't worry about it. We'll come back to it. Or an act of Congress. All right. So the Constitution, and I'll just say right now, nope. And then an act of Congress. Yes, this is where we have the Insurrection Act. This is where we have a lot of the other emergency acts and those kinds of things. So that's what we're talking about. Willfully uses any part of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, or the Space Force as a posse comitatus. Now, again, posse comitatus, and I just posted on this one for anyone who needs a refresher. The posse comitatus means like local law enforcement. The best way to kind of look at this is, let's go to the Wild West. Let's go out to the Wild West for a minute, right? And then let's just say, I don't want to use Wyatt Earp because I get it, but he was still kind of a weirdo. So let's just say we're in a small town. It's not Dodge because you want to get out of Dodge, but let's just say it's a small little town. And the sheriff's like, we had some bank robbers come by, and he's the only sheriff there, or she, well, it's going to be a he. Unless you're in Montana. I digress, everybody. The sheriff's like, I need some fellas or whatever to come with me to go hunt down the bad guys. So they assemble a posse to go with the sheriff who has the authority to go hunt the bad guys down. All right, everybody following me down that road? Deputized, yeah, that could be a piece of it. Actually, if you're deputized, you're part of the comitatus, all right? Because you are given local jurisdiction deputization authority. So it's a group of people with the authority of whatever local law there is to come in and take care of business. All right. So what they're saying here is willfully uses any part of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, or Space Force as a posse comitatus. So as a group of people with local law authority to go forward or otherwise to execute the laws shall be fined under this title. So this is an actual criminal statute or imprisoned by not more than 2 years or both. So this is setting out what a crime is. So you're like, well, what is this? Well, this is basically the backwards version of setting out of the idea that local law enforcement cannot be done by ordering military there. And the language is really important here. All right. So again, the language is very important because we're talking about the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Space Force. I can't say Space Force with a straight face, but you're saying here the federal military can't come in as local law enforcement, all right, to execute the laws. Because if you do, and some people are like, well, he doesn't pay attention to the laws. Fine. But if you do, then you will be fined under this title or imprisoned for up to 2 years. So it's a criminal offense for whoever to authorize the use of the military as a local law enforcement. Does everybody follow me down there? Does everybody follow me down this road? All right. So that's what the posse comitatus means. Now, you might think like, okay, all right, we're good to go. I'm going to toss this in for a second, and I don't want anybody to freak out, but I think it's important to note here, if there is a law or an act in place that allows it, so the Insurrection Act, all right, is what's in place here. But if there wasn't something that allowed for it, here's the problem. Who's the person that authorizes the military to go in? Right? Well, I mean, we could have like leaders in the military, right? right? Yeah, our laws are a mess, Jackie. I agree, especially regarding Guantanamo. That's, in my opinion, one of Obama's biggest uh, mistakes that he made. Congress. Right. So, right, Congress, I suppose. I don't know. Can Congress order the army to go into a city? I mean, they don't get their orders from the army or from the Congress. We've got the leaders, right? The leaders of the army that sit down in the room. The president, right? It's gonna be the president, right? Who tells the military dudes what to do? Dudes and dudettes. And it's gonna be the president or a lead dude or dudette. And they're gonna say, yo, president, we need to do this. The president's gonna be like, that sounds good. All right. So a leader there, but ultimately it's going to come down to the president as literally the commander in chief. All right. So here's the problem. No military can order the military to enter. Okay. Here's the problem, right? Yes, the DOD is definitely in play. If you do that, then it's a crime. And then the problem is that the president has immunity from any criminal indictment if it's part of his official duties. All right. So you all see what the problem is here. This immunity decision has a direct interference with this statute now, because it says right here we can charge criminally someone who's authorizing the use of the military as local law enforcement, right? So that would be the president or any of the generals. They're fine. Go arrest them. That's fine. No offense. But you can't bring the president down with it. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So we don't, this is one of the things they were trying to make clear when they were arguing this, when the justices were asking questions in the DC oral arguments in front of the panel. They're like, well, remember the SEAL Team 6 question? All right. Because we have laws in place for checks. And these laws now are, we got to get it figured out. So we don't really know. We don't really know now what's going to happen with that. I don't say that as a way of trying to make everybody freak out. I'm just saying that's an important factor. You've got to factor that in. Again, that case applies to one person and, perhaps more. We'll have to see. Sending in the troops is not an official duty, and that's the key, Alan. That's the key. The other thing, too, though, is if Congress gets involved with the sending in the troops bits, then that breaks the immunity. That will break that privilege. So there's a lot of things at play here. All right, so next up, so we've got this statute here, and this is a criminal statute. We're going to charge you. But all right, fine, whatever. But then now let's go back again. Let's go back into, our Insurrection Act area. So we're back in 10 U.S. Code Section 275. So this is its own piece. And this law says that there's a restriction on direct participation by military personnel. All right, so anyone in the military, any military person, all right, this code section applies to you. So everybody, all military branches, all the military people, this code section is applying to you. So let's take a look at it. The Secretary of, I gotta be careful. I got dinged on a video I posted using this word, so I'm gonna be careful. The Secretary shall prescribe such regulations as may be necessary to ensure that any activity, including the provision of any equipment or facility or the assignment or detail of any personnel under this chapter does not include or permit direct participation by a member of the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine Corps, or Space Force in a search, a seizure, arrest, or other similar activity. So there have to be regulations in place in the Department of D, in the DOD, to make it so that no members are able to go forward and do a search, a seizure, an arrest, or similar activity, unless the participation in such an activity by such a member is otherwise authorized by law. So it has to be very clear. What can authorize it? Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And it's not clear. It's not clear. Can you allow them to do searches and seizures and arrests and other similar activities under an executive order? That's a good question. We don't know. A proclamation? Again, we don't know. The reason why is because it's saying or otherwise authorized by law. Now, an executive order isn't law. An executive order is, like a command or a set of rules for just the feds to use. But in this particular situation, does the president have the authority to issue an executive order to give law enforcement power to members of the military? We don't know. We don't know. We just don't know. It's not clear. So that's the second problem. All right. So yes, we do have the posse comitatus out here, but this is not a be-all, end-all protection from local law enforcement having the military come in and start some stuff. There are a lot of, I'm not going to call them loopholes. I'm going to say there are a lot of exceptions and allowances in this. So it's not a blanket situation where we're like, okay, we're done. Right. So those are the two big acts that we have in play here. All right. But let's then, before, we freak out too much, too late. It's too late for that. All right, let's take a look then at what has to be in place in order for the Insurrection Act to be used, right? Because you still have to meet the requirements in order to even invoke the Insurrection Act, which is an exception to the posse comitatus, all right? So the Insurrection Act has to be invoked only for certain reasons. So let's take a look at that. All right, here we go. Let me bump this up a little bit. Again, this is from the Brennan Center for Justice and out of the School of Law in New York, if you're interested, if you want to pull this up yourself. So here's our chart. We've got a guide here to the emergency powers and how they can be used. It's interesting because this only came out... This came out as a response to the sheer quantity of emergencies that have been recently declared. Because what happens is if we come in and try to use this act, or if somebody comes in and tries to use this, the National Emergencies Act, this triggers a whole bunch of other statutes that allow for behavior that normally would not be allowed. But once this is declared, then it opens the door for all of these other things to occur. And how they've set it out here, which I think is brilliant, is they've taken each act, they've explained what it does, and then they explain what happens, because it's 136 statutes that get triggered depending on which emergency's in play. All right, so the emergency part of it's very important. Let's take a look here at the first one, National Emergencies Act of 1976. I'm going to just give you the emergencies acts just off the top, and then I'm going to come back and take you through the executive orders, all right, that have been in there. Was filing in court. Yeah, let me know. Let me know when he files it, because I'm here. So I'm here talking with all of you else. So here's a picture. You can screenshot if you want. This is what I'm going through right now. I'm not going to go through the whole packet right now. We just don't have time, but let's take a look at the highlights. Right, or emergency alleged. Yeah. All right, here we go. First one, National Emergencies Act of 1976, quote, with respect to acts of Congress authorizing the exercise during the period of a national emergency or any special or extraordinary power, the president's authorized to declare such national emergency. All right. The National Emergencies Act imposes procedural requirements on the president's exercise of emergency powers. It has governed the declaration of multiple emergencies, which I'm going to go through here. For a complete list, you can check it out here. So this is the beginning. This is where we're going to start. The National Emergency Declaration, which he's doing quite a bit. Now, I want to contrast this with what not the Supreme Court, but with what the courts have used recently, which has been the IEPA statute, right? So the tariffs are falling underneath the IEPA emergency statute. But the National Emergencies Act itself is a different creature, all right? Insurrection Act of 1807. Yeah, what about it? What about it? You need to know something about it? Yeah, right here. This is what you want to look for here. It's 10 U.S. Code Section 251. Okay, there you go. All right, so let's dive in again. I want to give you just an overall. So this is the framework again. Next, we've got the Public Health Service Act out of 1944. This is, what we used during the plague here. Next, we've got the Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. And again, there's multiple forms of this as well. So this is where the governor can ask the president for a declaration of an emergency for their state. And then that can trigger funding. All right, so this is kind of our FEMA statute here. And then flipping one more place here is another piece where the president can direct the drawdown of defense articles from Department of Defense stocks. I gotta be careful with that. The DoD services, military education, and training of a total value not to exceed $100 million per year for the purpose of providing military, economic, peacekeeping, anti-business, and/or non-proliferation assistance to foreign countries and international organizations. That one's not been used right now. 1961. So there you go. Again, this whole packet here goes in and explains it, and I do want to get through it, but I also want to take us back to take a look at all of the national emergency acts that are still in place. We still have some emergency acts that are still working, that nobody has turned over, nobody has dealt with. All right, so far. So here we go. Let's dive in. Oh, I know, right? All right, so here we go. Again, this does not cover anything in the IEPA cases. This is where our tariff cases are, where we went into the International Trade Court. So these, we're not referring to any of that in this batch here. So we're talking about all of the times the National Emergencies Act has been used since its start. So we've got the first one in 1979, blocking Iranian government property. All right. Now, if it doesn't have a green dot, it means that it has been terminated, so that the emergency is no longer in place. All right. So this one's been terminated. Next, in 1980, further prohibitions on transactions with Iran. And that's also been terminated. 1983, continuation of export control regulations. That was terminated. Continuation of export control regulations again in 84, so a year later or 6 months later here. 1985, prohibiting trade in certain other transactions involving Nicaragua. That's expired here. 1985, prohibiting trade in certain other transactions involving South Africa. 1986, prohibiting trade in certain transactions involving Libya. 1988, prohibiting certain transactions with respect to Panama. Again, if it's got a check mark, it means it's expired. It's no longer running here. 1990, blocking Iraqi government property and prohibiting transactions with Iraq. Here, that has expired. And next, here, 1990, continuation of export control regulations. So that one's done. 1990, chemical and biological weapons proliferation. Okay, looks like that one was pulled in 94. 1991, prohibiting certain transactions with respect to Haiti. 92, blocking Government. Oh my gosh, remember when it used to be Yugoslavia? Oh my gosh, that's a long time ago. Government property and property of the government of Serbia and Montenegro. 1993, prohibiting certain transactions involving UNITA. 1993, measures to restrict the participation by United States persons in this proliferation activities. 94, continuation of export control regulations here. 94, another one. Measures to restrict the participation by the United States persons in, again, this activity here. 1994, blocking property and additional measures with respect to the Bosnian Serb-controlled areas of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Of course, that was when the Yugoslavia fell apart, or came apart. I don't think it fell apart, came apart. Milosevic, not your friend. 1994, again, we've got proliferations of weapons of this type. 95, prohibiting transactions with terrorists who threaten to disrupt the Middle East peace process. All right, here we go. Yes, I think it's important, right? Because everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're declaring, the Emergencies Act. Well, let's see, what have we done in the past here? All right, 95, prohibiting transactions for the development of Iranian petroleum resources. Where's Mr. Global? And next we've got 95, blocking assets and prohibiting transactions with significant narcotic traffickers. Okay. Again, these are executive orders, everyone. If you're wondering where these came from, it's an executive order here. Some are proclamations. Next, 96, regulation of the anchorage and movement of vessels with respect to Cuba. All right, history lesson, I know. And this emergency is still in place. This emergency has not been canceled. So this one's ongoing from 1996. Next, prohibiting new investment to Burma, which Burma has been renamed, right? We talked about that last time. All right, so Burma here, that has expired. Next, 97, bringing back the memories, I know, right? I'm taking everybody through the years here. Blocking Sudanese government property and prohibiting transactions with Sudan. 98, blocking property of the governments of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Serbia, Montenegro, the Republic of Serbia, and the Republic of Montenegro, and prohibiting new investment in the Republic of Serbia in response to the situation in Kosovo. Myanmar, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I couldn't remember. I was like, I know it starts with an M, but I had forgotten. Thank you for letting me know. Appreciate it. Next, in 1999. Okay, so let's take a peek here. So 98 in June, and then in 99. Wait, hold on. The time, it flies, everybody. It flies by. All right, here we go. 99, we had blocking property and prohibiting transactions with the Taliban. 2000, blocking property of the government from the Russian Federation relating to the disposition of highly enriched, these words that I'm not going to say, again, these have expired. 2001, prohibiting importation of rough diamonds from Sierra Leone. 2001, blocking property or persons who threaten international stabilization efforts in the Western Balkans. Oh my gosh, for some reason I keep forgetting about the Balkans. That was a pretty major time for the Balkans. Yeah, they struggled. Oh my gosh. Okay, 2001, we've got some more export control regulations. 2001, declaration of national emergency by reason of certain acts, T-acts, right? So we can note the date on that. And this is a proclamation. And technically, pieces are still in place. Pieces from this emergency have not been expired or withdrawn. So it says here, there have been multiple amendments that have been added to it over the years, including clarifications through executive orders. and even an executive order all the way up to 2017, giving clarification. So this is still in place. All right. Yikes. Here we go. Flipping it. 2001, blocking property, prohibiting transactions with persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support the T word here. I'm trying to make it so everyone can see comments here. I apologize. All right. Blocking persons undermining democratic processes or institutions in Zimbabwe. And that's 2003, a development fund for Iraq and certain other property in which Iraq has an interest. 2004, property persons prohibiting export of certain goods to Syria here. Yes, take care. Have a great rest of your day. 2004, persons prohibiting import from Liberia. 2005, to suspend Chapter 4, a subchapter 4 of Chapter 31 of Title 40, United States Code, within a limited geographic area in response to the national emergency caused by Hurricane Katrina. So this was national emergency situation with Katrina here, and it's still up and running. It's not expired. It's not been withdrawn. So there's still pieces of that at play. Next, 2006, conflict in Côte d'Ivoire here. And next, we've got 2006, which is Belarus. 2006, Congo. 2007, sovereignty of Lebanon or its democratic processes. 2008, continuing certain restrictions with respect to North Korea nationals. Yeah, this is, okay, wait, I haven't pulled this up, but it says most recently continued by notice of June of 2024. So this was still being added to here. So I don't know about that one. Next, we have a 2009 declaration of national emergency with respect to the H1N1 influenza pandemic here, and that's still ongoing. It's not been expired either. Let's see, we've got Somalia here, Libya here, blocking property of transnational criminal organizations. This was in 2011. Next, we have Yemen is here in 2012. Then we have disposition of highly enriched weapons in the Russia. We're almost through this, everyone. But again, I think it's really important to remember when the National Emergency Act has been used, right? So next we've got 2014 for Ukraine, 2014 for South Sudan, 2014 for Central African Republic here, 2015 for Venezuela, 2015 for malicious cyber-enabled activities. All right, so cyber stuff. 2015 Burundi, 2017 serious human rights abuse or corruption. That's interesting. 2017, all right, 2018 sanctions in the event of foreign interference with the U.S. elections. So those sanctions were put into place. 2018 Nicaragua. Right. And here we go. 2019, national emergency concerning the southern border of the United States. This is still going. All right, this was put into place in 2019, and it is still going. All right, now we know that the administration came back in January, right? So it says here, most recently continued by a notice in January of 2021. And then terminated. This was terminated in January 20th of 2021. So literally, there you have it. And then reinstated in January of 2025. All right, so this was withdrawn. And then as soon as the next administration came into office, that day, reinstated this. Okay, next, 2019, supply chain. Well, I mean, okay, supply chain and going here. And then 2019, we have Mali. 2019 is Syria. 2020 is going to be the influenza. It's not influenza. Sorry, everybody. I should have said that. The plague. 2020, we've got bulk power systems. 2020, we've got property of certain associates in the ICC. This is in 2020, right? I mean, are you feeling like maybe we're going back in time, but it's very similar, right? So this administration had all of this stuff already in place and then came in with a whole bunch of new executive orders, right? All right, so 2020, executive order on Hong Kong normalization. And then 2020, we had critical minerals from foreign adversaries and supporting the domestic mining and processing industries. 2020. Right. So what I'm trying to show you again as we go through this is that, we're not really in new territory for some things. We're just going back to the way that it was during the first administration. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying we've been through it before. 2020, we have investments that finance communist, these kinds of companies. 2021, Burma. 2021, Russian Federation. 2021, human rights crisis in Ethiopia. 21 here, global illicit DRUG trade. 22, people of Afghanistan here. 2022, the Declaration of National Emergency and Invocation of Emergency Authority relating to the regulation of the anchorage and movement of Russian affiliated vessels to United States ports. Egads. So that's still in place. This is also in place. Yeah, this has not been done. It has not been changed. Who knows what will happen tomorrow? 2022, bolstering efforts to bring hostages and wrongfully detained United States nationals home. 2022, and then we're on the last page here, everybody. 2023, we have addressing U.S. investments in certain national security technologies and products in countries of concern. 24, sanctions on persons undermining peace, security, and stability in the West Bank. 24, sensitive personnel, preventing access to Americans' sensitive personal data and United States government-related data by countries of concern. So not our own country, but other countries of concern. 25, strengthening and promoting innovation for cybersecurity. And then we have our new administration. All right. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question, Brett. So here we go. This is what we have in place now at the moment under the national emergency situation. All right. So all of this is when a national emergency act has been triggered here. So first, declaring national energy emergency, designating cartels and other organizations as foreign bad things, declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States, though one was already in place, imposing duties to address the flow of illicit DRUGSs across the northern border, imposing duties to address the situation at our southern border. So I guess this is duties and emergencies. So, there you go. Imposing duties to address the synthetic bad thing supply chain. Imposing sanctions on the International Criminal Court. So before, the criminal court had already been pulled out, had been singled out, but now we're having sanctions. And then regulating imports with a reciprocal tariff to rectify trade practices that contribute to the large and persistent annual United States goods trade deficits. I mean, could your title be any longer? I'm just curious. So there we go. All right. I just wanted to show you what it has looked like in the past since 1979 when we've had a national emergency situation. All right, so let's go with that knowledge, armed with that knowledge, let's go dive back in here into the explanation of emergency powers and how they work and what they trigger. All right. Right. just sanctions. If you read that executive order, the sanctions against the ICC, it's because how did he put it? He was like, you had negative thoughts about me. I mean, it was pretty weak. It's pretty weak, but it was one of those like things where the accusation was they were intentionally trying to make things difficult for Mr. Orange. And because of that, it meant that they were biased and needed to be sanctioned. Something along those lines. 3:30. I can invite you. Hey, 3:30, 3:30 Central. We can do that. Sure, you bet. 3:30 Central. I mean, is that Central? I don't know. I'll have to say. Watch Congress, but I've been for 10 days. My whole crew keeps, yeah, let's do it. Let's do 3:30 today. Eastern. Okay, so that's, hold on now, just a minute. Wait, you're already at, aren't you already at 3:30 Eastern? How about, let me think about it. I'll DM you, okay? I'll DM you after the live. Sorry, everybody. We've got important stuff to go through here. 2:15. Oh, yeah, I'm going to need a little bit more time than that. Yes, I do. I have to rest my voice for about an hour after my lives before I speak again. So, all right, let's dive back in. So we've got the National Emergencies Act. Take care of yourself. Linny, appreciate you coming by. Public Health Services Act, right? We've been through that. This is the FEMA Act here. So these emergency pieces we've looked at, but let's take a look again at more of our emergency indications here. Oh, you're giving the current time. You know, when numbers are involved, everybody, things just go south for me. They just go south. All right. Here we go. We've got a key. So they've color coded, which, you know, I can appreciate. We've got our subject matter. So what is the question regarding the emergency? What code is there? Again, what powers are now available to the president? And what kind of delegations of authority are there? All right. So these are our three different columns. And then we've got color coding, meaning if it's gray, there's no restriction on president's powers. If it's gold, no meaningful restrictions. Green means substantial restrictions on president's power. And then a blue means Congress needs to be involved. All right. So here we go. Secretary of Health and Human Services may waive confidentiality certification, sanctions, and other provisions as necessary to supply public health services. All right. Any emergency area during an emergency period here or disaster declared by the president pursuant to the National Emergencies Act or our FEMA stuff here, down here, a public health emergency declared by the secretary pursuant to this section of the code as well says, quote, if the secretary determines after consultation with such public health officials as may be necessary. So let's pause for a minute. So who's the secretary? Oh my gosh. Who's the secretary of our oh my gosh. What? Hold on, this is just hit me right now, everybody. Oh my gosh, here we go. Here it is. Department of Health and Human Services. Is it Kennedy? Oh my gosh. Is that right? I mean, I'd have to pull up this section. Oh my goodness gracious. All right. So yeah, I mean, section 247D. Oh my goodness. Right. All right. I mean, that's, again, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So that would be him. If the secretary determines after consultation with such public health officials as may be necessary that 1, a disease or disorder presents a public health emergency, or 2, a public health emergency including significant outbreaks of infection, diseases, or attacks otherwise exist, the secretary may take such action as may be appropriate to respond. All right. Here we go. Let's see. We've got, and then invocations, delegations of authority. So we've got, look Social Security Act pieces. For example, a recent invocation of this statute, declaration of a national emergency with respect to 2009 H1N1 pandemic here. Certain authorities under this section have since been delegated through the waiver authority, though the waiver authority remains with the secretary. So that's a lot of power for the secretary here. Yeah, okay. Well, let's skip through Kennedy. Yeah, it is. It is. Let's just skip through Kennedy. All right, here's another one. The governor of a state may petition the president to suspend any part of the Clean Air Act implementation plan or requirement under 42 U.S. Code. That's interesting. Upon application by the owner or operator of a fuel-burning stationary source, and after notice and opportunity for public hearing, the governor of the state in which such a source is located may petition the president to determine that a national or regional energy emergency exists of such severity that a temporary suspension may be necessary, and that other means of responding to the emergency may be inadequate. Right, so it looks like the governor of a state can ask the president to suspend the Clean Air Act for their state. That's disconcerting. It's a little disconcerting. Keep moving on here. We're back to the public health and safety. I'm going to just fast forward through that for a minute here. All right, next up we've got from 1969, the president may suspend the operation of provisions regulating the storage, transportation, disposal, procurement, handling, and testing of chemical and biological things, including the prohibition on testing such weapons on human subjects. Oh, egad. So you can suspend the operation of that, all right, during the period of any war declared by Congress and during the period of any national emergency declared by Congress. So only in those situations. Goodness gracious. All right. Oh, certain laws governing the disposal of garbage at sea, including restrictions on disposal near land and a prohibition on the discharge of waste that may contain toxic chemicals or heavy metals, do not apply during a time of war. All right, so when we're talking about the Alien Enemies Act, right, that's supposed to be during a time of war. So here we go. So you can suspend the garbage in the ocean during a time of war. Public vessels can dispose of potentially infectious medical waste into the ocean waters during the time of war. Let's fast forward this before I get too depressed. Thanks, Thomas. Oh my goodness. All right, here we go. Can waive the 30-day minimum comment period on proposed rules for the Energy and Policy Conservation Act if the waiver is necessary to act expeditiously during an emergency. All right, Secretary of Human Services here. This is a big one, everybody. So let's take a look at this one. And then I'm going to kind of go back through and recap here. Secretary of Health and Human Services may waive provisions of the HIV Healthcare Services Program to improve the health and safety of those receiving care under the program and the general public, but may not expend more than 5% of the funds allocated under the program for supplemental grants, 2009. Well, I don't think any grants are going through right now, right? Right. Well, and what's, yeah, we're under a war right now. Just a good point. But it says time of war or declared national emergency. So yeah, the waters get muddied by the trash that we're putting in the ocean. All right. Emergency area during an emergency period. So we've got all these different pieces again. So we're talking about where are the safe zones. So let me cruise through this. I'm going to spend some more time on this when we have more time. But let me cruise through here because the question that we're dealing with right now in California is the military, right? So here we go. President can authorize any agency that exercises functions in connection with the national defense to enter into, amend, or make advance payments on contracts. All right, so this is payments only during a national emergency declared by Congress or the president. So this is just money, but I'm talking about power here. Secretary of the Navy may authorize by regulation the transport and subsistence of any person on a naval vessel at government expense. 1946, all right, in a time of war or during a national emergency. Secretary of the Army may discontinue or consolidate basic branches of the Army. Who knew that? Did anybody know that? I didn't know that. Right. Oh, the watermelon. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for the gifts, everybody. All right. I was unaware of that. Discontinue or consolidate basic branches of the Army. I paused because this is in P25. That's why I pause here. For the duration of any war or of any national emergency declared by Congress. All right. The authority designated by the secretary concerned may, without the consent of the persons concerned, order any unit and any member of the ready reserve to active duty for up to 24 consecutive months. No more than 1 million members of the ready reserve may be on active duty without their consent under this section at any one time. In a time of a national emergency declared by the president after January 1st of 1953 or when otherwise authorized by law. So by the secretary concerned. So does this mean like any secretary? So any of the cabinet secretaries? Is that I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly. Because we got a lot of secretaries in here. And it looks like in a time of national emergency as well. Yeah. All right, next. Any law removing any restriction contained in any then existing law for the duration of the war, national emergency. So restrictions here, and I think we've got the Hegseth memo, actually, which is involved in a lot of lawsuits. That could be applicable there. So then existing law as applied to the Navy shall remove such restrictions as applied to the Coast Guard. So the Coast Guard has to come up into the same level as the Navy if it's decided. Again, I'm going through the powers here that have been provided by statute to various executive defense stuff. Right? So if you're saying like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. That's what we're going through right now. Here we go. Next up, Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard's operating may, at reasonable rates and fare fixed, provide transportation to and from work for people working at private plants that are manufacturing materials for the Coast Guard. That's interesting. I had no idea about that. All right. During a time of war, national emergency. All right. So he could do that. Anytime he's declaring a national emergency here, he's unlocking one of these powers. Secretary of Military Department concerned may provide transportation to and from work for employees of and persons attached to a private plant manufacturing material for that department. The Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard's operating may suspend provisions related to masters and officers of merchant vessels. Yes. Next, the president may suspend statutory officer strength and distribution in grade requirements. Ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, this came about, invoked in response to the continuing threat posed by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in furtherance of an executive order in 1990 and delegated to the Secretary of Defense. Oh, goodness gracious. Right. False national, well, exactly right. And this question of, well, who gets to ultimately declare what's a national emergency? Again, we have to have some definitions and interpretations in place if it doesn't specify it in the statute. All right, so president may temporarily appoint any qualified person to any officer grade in the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine Corps, but not to grades above Major General or Rear Admiral. That's distressing. So appoint any qualified person. I mean, he's not going to know what a qualified person is, right? To any officer grade in the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine Corps. Yeah, qualified, yeah. Ugh. All right, next. President may suspend the operation of statutes governing the authorized strengths and distribution of reserve officers in an active status in the armed forces. Can suspend the operation, so can stop the statutes that authorize strength and distribution of reserve officers. Yeah. All right. President may suspend the operation of certain statutes related to officers in the Coast Guard Reserve in a time of war. Again, anytime we've got national emergency, but it has to be the president. Here it looks like it can only be through Congress. Yeah, he's not qualified. I don't think he should be allowed because he's not even qualified. All right. So, and again, I'm just going to hit on these. We've just got another page here of the defense pieces here. Because this is like what I'm worried about, right? You phone a friend. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Jesus, take the wheel. All right. The Undersecretary of Transportation. So, okay. Authorized to coordinate domestic transportation among other duties. During a national emergency, however, the Secretary shall prescribe the circumstances constituting a national emergency for purposes of this subsection. All right, so the Undersecretary of Transportation. So the Transportation Secretary dude can determine if there is a national emergency to use this piece. I feel like I'm told Jesus taking the wheel. All right. Procedural and substantive limitations in statute granting the president broad authority to create, maintain, protect, expand, or restore domestic industrial base capabilities that are essential for the national defense may be waived. So limitations. we can waive some limitations here. Yeah. During a period of national emergency declared by Congress or the president, or upon the determination by the president on a non-delegable basis that action is necessary to avert an industrial resource or critical technology item shortfall that would severely impair national defense capabilities. So let's back this truck up for a second. So what are we saying here? Any kind of procedural or substantive limitations that are federal law can be here in order to maintain, protect. Okay, that doesn't sound great. That's funny. All right, here we go. President may. I don't know. I've got questions about that. I'm starting to see spots. So let's skip to the next one. Oh my gosh. All right. President may suspend the operation of statutes imposing distribution in grade requirements of the Navy. Powers to amend and expanded to allow suspension of further statutes. Okay. Department of Veterans Affairs may provide health care to members of the armed forces serving in national emergency. All right. So during and immediately following that period of time set out here, limitations on the size of the office of the Secretary of the Army do not apply if we've got, may be exceeded by a number equal to 15%, all right? Limitations on the size of the office of the Secretary of the Navy do not apply. Here, again, President may suspend or defer any end strength limitation for any military or civilian component of, this worries me. The more I look at this, the more I'm like, oh dear. Boy, we've really given the president a lot of authority here. The Coast Guard Reserve for a period not to exceed 6 months after the end of a war or national emergency. Additional time available for audit of the armed forces. Here, limitations on the size of the office of the Secretary of Air Force do not apply. President can defer any end strength, number of active duty military and civilian personnel in a military or civilian component of the armed forces or of the Department of Defense on the last day of a particular accounting period. Limitations with respect to that fiscal year and so on. President may waive any statutory end strength, the number of active duty military civilian personnel here for the Department of Defense on the last day. Again, President may waive any statutory limit that would otherwise apply during that period of a number of members and so on. Again, that's a repeat of the earlier one. Secretary of Defense without regard to any other provision of law. I'm worried. Here we go. I'm worried. May undertake military construction projects. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm seeing spots. Hold on. And may authorize secretaries of the military departments to undertake military construction projects that are necessary to support such use of the armed forces. Okay. In the event of a declaration of war or the declaration of the president of a national emergency in accordance with the National Emergencies Act that requires use of the armed forces. So this is that southern border national emergency situation then opens the door to construction projects. Right. Shows their jazzy hands. Yes. Oh, all right. Now I'm going to just flip through this real quick. President can alter automatic adjustments to federal pay schedules after first reporting to Congress. President can implement alternate comparability payments after talking to Congress. President can suspend statutory wage rate requirements for public contracts. Department of Defense function performed by civilian employees may be converted to contractor performance without a public-private competition. Certain retired officers may be ordered to active duty, and time limits on recall service by retired service members do not apply. Limitations on the number of retired officers who've been ordered to active duty and at any one time do not apply. President can suspend any provision of law related to the promotion, retirement, or separation of permanent reserve warrant officers of any armed forces. In the case of commissioned officer, cadet, or midshipman, the secretary, undersecretary, or assistant secretary of the military department concerned may commute a court-martial sentence of dismissal to reduction to any enlisted grade. A person so reduced may be required to serve for the duration of the war here and for 6 months thereafter. Well, that's a little disconcerting too, right? So this is basically the military equivalent of pardoning here. Right. Certain restrictions on promotion of commissioned officers here. President can suspend any provision of law related to the promotion, involuntary retirement, or separation of commissioned officers of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard. And let's see. I'm skipping through that. Air Force Chief of Staff may be reappointed for a second term of not more than 4 years. Secretary of the department in which the Coast Guard's operating may order any regular officer on the retired list to active duty. Oh my goodness. And commander of the, all right, I gotta fast forward here. Let me fast forward again and see if we've got anything that's critical at this point, because I gotta bring the curtain down here pretty soon. President can assign additional armed forces personnel to selective service system. Yikes. Agricultural debt relief authorized for reserves mobilized to serve during a national emergency. All right. And I don't want to spend too much more time on the Secretary of Defense, because I could get into trouble like I did last time. All right, let's go back to the beginning, everybody. Let's bring it home. Let's bring the show to a close here. So I will probably be spending some more time going through and making sure that I didn't miss anything here. But you can kind of get an idea then of what's happened before when we've had national emergencies declared, right? So when we're talking about this situation, the Insurrection Act, we pulled up the code sections. We looked through to see if any code section actually triggers the use of military or federal authority here. And then we also looked to see is anything prohibited by it through the posse comitatus criminal statute or the other restrictions on military personnel. So we looked through that as well. So that's kind of an overview of what we've been going through here. Now, again, this idea of who and what qualifies as a national emergency, that's something that has to get hashed out in our definition sections. And also, too, keep in mind with this administration, every single word is up for grabs. It's absolutely up for grabs. Is it facilitate? House? What's a house? What does left mean? Every single word is being challenged in court. And the courts are like, all right, so they're starting to set out definitions for everything. Like when I refer to you, I mean you, the government, those kinds of things. So the courts will shift in order to accommodate BS because that's part of their job. But when we're looking here at a martial law situation, that's way down the road. And again, the key here is that the state judiciary, here we go, the judicial proceedings are unable to correct anything that's going on. And that's why you have to switch then to another road. Yeah, exactly, Navy Vet. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. What the hell? That's what I'm saying. So I hope this cleared some things up for everybody. I did just do a post on the Insurrection Act and the Posse Comitatus. I just did one on both of those. So you can look that up. But I think it's a good idea. And one of the things that I wanted to remind everybody when I was going through Doge and Social Security is that, this isn't the only show in town. We've had a lot of executive orders and a lot of things from other presidents or even from this president's first administration that were in place before and we made it through. All right. So I think that's something to always remember. We made it through once. We'll make it through again. Right. All right. Well, with that, everyone, I am planning to be over on the tube tomorrow. That's my Tuesday nights on the tube. And then from there, I am planning to do a sub chat Wednesday. I will put a post up about that so everybody knows. But I will not be able to come back on again tonight. But thank you all again for joining me. And I appreciate it so much. Hakuna Matata. Oh my gosh, that's so fun. Yes, although if something crazy happens, I'll be back again. Thank you all again. Thank you, moderators. I'll DM you there so you can do a little chit chat. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And if anything crazy happens, I'll let you know. So take care.